Good evening, ladies and gentlemen in the chamber and online. Welcome to tonight's Performance and Finance Scrutiny Committee for Wednesday the 21st of January. Have we got any apologies for absence, Mr. Scott?
No, thank you, Chair. Everyone's present.
Thank you. Committee, are we happy to approve the minutes from the previous meeting? Yes, Councillor Wilson.
Yeah, happy with the minutes, but there is a point that I'm not sure if it's supposed to be there or not. It's near the bottom of page 5. It says members also inquired as to the status of the deferred polling place review for Valley End, for which an update was agreed to be provided. Is that update still going to be provided, or have I missed it? Apologies if I have.
Bear with us for just 1 second.
Thank you for the question, Councillor Wilson, and sorry for my bemusement. That's just my lack of memory. I believe I referenced it in the presentation that was done at Council around the Community Governance Review, but if you're happy for me to do so, I'll circulate a response to all councillors on PNF.
Thanks, that would be even better. Thank you.
Are you, subject to that, are we happy to sign the minutes? Yes? Okay, thank you. Okay, thank you. So next item is declarations of interest. Are there any for any items on the agenda tonight? Okay, thank you. I don't believe we have any public questions. No, brilliant. Okay, so that puts us on to item 5, joint waste procurement update. Over to, is it Councillor Rise or is it over to Councillor Rise?
Thank you, Chair, and good evening, members. I would like to thank you for the opportunity to bring forward this update on the waste contract procurement process. We're joined tonight by Sally Hunt, Head of Commercial, Commissioning and Projects for Joint Waste Solutions, who has been leading this process on behalf of the 4 JWS authorities. Also, we have Sue McCubbin as Head of Housing, Community and Recreation Services as Surrey Heath's lead officer for this service. Before I hand over to Ms Hunt, I just wanted to give an introduction and overview of the waste contract. Surrey Heath entered into its waste contract in 2017. This was a 10-year contract with Amy. This contract is across 4 authorities, including ourselves, Woking, Elmbridge and Mole Valley. Surrey Heath serves as the host authority for Joint Waste Solutions. However, the costs of the contract are shared across each authority, both for contract management and the cost of the service itself. The 10-year contract is coming to its end with the final day of this contract in April 2027. This required us to look at the next waste contract, as I'm sure you'll all agree that we need to continue having our bins collected. When we started the process, local government reorganisation weren't even words we'd heard of, days that I almost long for now. However, at the start of this process, the 4 authorities agreed to stay together for procurement, and we had reached out to all Surrey authorities to gauge interest in expanding the joint authority. There was little appetite from the other councils, and we decided to move forward as the 4. Not long after we began the process, LGR was floated by the government, but no detail had been provided. It was unknown what was going to happen, therefore we resolved as the 4 authorities to continue as the joint authority, which would be an attractive option and would continue to build on the successes and the experience of JWS and our staff. As LGR has progressed, it would be a reasonable question as to why we would continue as the joint authority, especially as the 4 authorities will now be split into 2 new councils. There are 2 answers to this. The first, the current contract will end and there is no question of the existing contract being extended. This is due to the current legal dispute between the councils and Amy, and I will not be expanding on that or answering any questions on the legal dispute as it currently is still in process. However, it is relevant to why we made the decision. Also, Amy have signalled that they would not agree to an extension of the contract. The second answer is that no matter the unitary authority, there would be a need for a new approach to waste, and there is little to no possibility that would be a quick decision. If we look at West Surrey, we will be bringing together six waste collection services, all at various points of procurement or service delivery. Having an established waste collection service in place as we move into years of uncertainty could ensure the service delivery of a vital service over a number of years and enabling the new council to get their feet under the table before being confronted with procuring a major new service for the 2 former council areas. What will be important for the new contract, in my opinion, is ensuring that the new inter-authority agreement is set up, that will be set up, properly acknowledges the geographical areas of the service, of service delivery. Currently, the Joint Waste Services Collection Committee is made up of the portfolio holders from each authority. With this as a fundamental aspect of the IAA, it would be that the two new cabinet level councillors from each East and West Surrey councils, but those could be councillors that are not from one of the four former authorities. Therefore, I have requested that the inter-authority agreement takes that into account and ensures that there is representation of the former councillors on the new collection committee within the new inter-authority agreement. I'd like to thank Sally Hunt, Kelly Goldsmith, the entire JWS team, our officers at Surrey Heath, and the wider officers across the four authorities in the work that they've done to this progress on this process to date. And now I'd like to hand over to Sally Hunt, who will be taking you through the full update. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Rice. I'm just going to share some slides that will be able to give a bit of an overview to add to what Councillor Rice has just said and to explain the progress that we've been making so far and the steps that are coming up next. So in terms of overview of the procurement, so to echo some of the comments that Councillor Rice just said, so the procurement is currently underway to seek a new service provider to deliver the waste collection and street cleaning services when the current contract with Amy ends in 2027. And the four authorities are continuing to work together jointly to procure the new service to continue to benefit from the joint efficiencies and ensure continuity of service for residents when the current contract with Amy ends. So the new contract will be awarded around July to August time this year. That's subject to confirmation of the shadow authority decision dates. So that will then allow sufficient time to mobilise the new service before the Amy contract comes to an end. That includes activities such as buying the new vehicles and doing the IT integration of systems to get everything ready for the new service, which will be starting in June 2027. The contract is being let for an initial term of 7 years. It's standard within the waste industry to have quite a long term of contract because of the size and the value of the contract, with the option to then extend for a further 7 years and a further 7 years, so a potential to cover 21 years in total. And in terms of the services that are in scope of the new contract, it's the same services that are currently within the current contract. So for Elmbridge, Mole Valley, Surrey Heath and Woking, all four areas will be having waste collections. Woking don't have the street cleaning in scope, but for the other three authorities they do. Woking include their street cleaning with their grounds maintenance contract instead. And then there's the contact centre administration for both Surrey Heath and Woking as currently, and also the garden waste service administration too. And in terms of what we're taking from the current contract, we're as much as we possibly can taking improvements and learnings from the current contract. So there's items such as social value will form 10% of the procurement assessment. We're strengthening the key performance indicators and performance mechanism and reporting processes. We're also improving the specification around street cleaning to ensure that it's specified the frequency of cleaning in the town centre shopping areas and high visibility through routes. We're also looking at ability to increase the reuse of bulky waste and increase the capture of small electricals and textiles, and those are the things that we're seeking from the bidders in the procurement process. And we're also looking at the options to develop a fleet decarbonisation strategy during the initial contract term. So in terms of what has happened so far on the procurement, so we started officially the process when the tender notice was published in August last year. And at that point, we had 7 interested bidders that submitted what's known as a procurement-specific questionnaire. They were asked to complete a number of questions about their organisation, and that allowed us to assess them against our conditions of participation. Are the companies large enough? Do they have relevant kind of reference contracts that they currently run? Do they meet our financial standing criteria? We reviewed those, and 6 that submitted passed those conditions of participation, and we invited those 6 to take part in submitting initial tenders. We then had one bidder who did subsequently withdraw because that they were already working on other bids, so had limited capacity to be able to take part in ours. But then we had 5 bidders who went forward and joined initial dialogue meetings where we discussed our requirements, were able to clarify things, and they were able to talk about their solutions. So that process happened during October. And then we had all 5 of those bidders that we'd had those dialogue sessions with submitted their initial bids in November. And it's been really pleasing to see that we've had that level of interest with key players in the market who see this contract as being very attractive to them because of the size of it and the kind of strategic position within the country. So they're very interested in getting the contract, which is good news for us that we've got good competition within the process. And after the bids were submitted, they were then assessed against a set of criteria for quality, finance and social value. And so that was assessed by Joint Waste Solutions and authority staff and supported by our consultants, Eunomia as well. That was carried out at the end of November, beginning of December, and then the assessment was moderated and confirmed just before Christmas. I've got a stage that talks about overview of next procurement stages, but these slides were created about a week ago. So we've just completed one stage more as well, which was completing the shortlisting. So following us doing all the scoring and working out which 3 had got the highest scores to go through, we needed to, before we could communicate that to them, we needed to produce some detailed feedback on why we scored them at that level, and that was reviewed by our legal support, and we issued those out to bidders this Monday. So we have just completed the shortlisting to our 3 bidders that we're going to be taking forward, and communicated to the 2 that we're not going to be taking forward. And those 3 shortlisted bidders have been invited to participate in some further dialogue discussions, which is the stage that's coming up next. So in terms of the further dialogue process, that's starting from next week and then will run through to the end of March. And aim of that process is to provide feedback to the shortlisted bidders to highlight the areas where we think that they need to improve upon their initial bids so that we can get the best solution possible from them. We can discuss any areas where our requirements could be amended or their bids could be amended to achieve efficiencies or improve the service. And also for us to reach agreement on exactly what the wording in the contract, the performance regime and the charging mechanism will be that the bidders will submit their final bids against. So it's finalising all of the details so that they can put in their bids to meet exactly what we want and they're able to deliver. So after we've completed that process and we issue the request for final tenders, we'll then get their final bids in. And then during May and early June, those bids will be assessed and moderated. So like we did for the initial bids, but for the 3 final bids. And that assessment is based on 45% quality, 45% price and 10% social value. And then the decision to award the contract to the highest scoring bidder alongside agreement to a new inter-authority agreement, as Councillor Rise mentioned, to govern the partnership will be taken to each of the 4 district and borough councils, including obviously Surrey Heath, during July, And then we're anticipating it will then go next to the shadow unitary authorities to also confirm the decision to award the contract and enter into the IAA once those meeting dates are confirmed. And then once the councils have all reached a decision, the contract will be awarded and the process of mobilising the new contract ready for the service to commence in June 2027 will start. So then there's just a slide to show the overview of the different stages that will be occurring from now, when we've just informed the shortlisted bidders, the range of dialogue meetings that will be happening over February and March, where we go into the detail of IT demos, providing them feedback, talking through the legal contract, talking through the property depot details, talking through the charging mechanisms, and all of the finer details, to inviting the final bids in April, evaluating in May and June, and then making decisions to award in July and August, ready to mobilise the contract. So hopefully that provides a good overview. I will hand back now, but I'm happy to take any questions anyone may have.
I need to just make one slight correction. Obviously, in my introduction, I said April 27. I meant June 2027. I do apologise, but I'm happy to answer any questions as well.
Thank you. Before we start, thank you to the team for pulling this together. I have one question, because it was mentioned 3 times, and it was a question I asked you at the chair. Social value was mentioned 3 times. Could you just clarify what social value actually means?
Of course, that's fine. So social value is, I don't know what the technical definition is, but it's basically the kind of additional value that a contract can deliver above and beyond the services that are being procured. So it mainly came about from central government procurement. They mandated a few years ago that all of their procurements would provide at least 10% weighting towards social value. So it's now also best practice to do so within local government. So for what we're procuring, we've split it out into kind of 4 themes, which cover community, economy, planet and work. So as well as submitting the details of what they're going to deliver in terms of their waste collections and street cleaning, they also need to explain what additional value they can provide to the local area in those themes. So examples, but this isn't necessarily exactly what will be delivered, because it will depend upon the winning bidders' suggestions. But there could be things such as with work, it could be things such as guaranteeing that they'll provide a certain amount of local employment, providing apprenticeships, recruiting from underrepresented or challenged groups such as ex-offenders or long-term employed, providing upskilling. In the area of planet, it might be activities to reduce their CO2, so it could be activities they may do to reduce their energy use at the depots. It may be activities to increase biodiversity, tree planting, things like that. In economy, it might be things such as ensuring that they will purchase in their supply chains a certain amount from local businesses to support the local economy. In community, it might be things such as supporting local community groups like repair cafes or litter picking groups. It might be ensuring that their staff do a certain number of days of volunteering. So hopefully that helps to give kind of a flavour of the type of thing. So as part of the bids, we would ask, as well as them detailing exactly how they're going to deliver the actual service, we also ask them to submit what social value they will deliver, so we can then score them on that, and that will form 10% of the score. So they have an incentive to ensure that it is serious what they're proposing, and then there's mechanisms within the contract to ensure that they are delivering that on an annual basis, and there would be penalties if they said they were going to deliver it and then they didn't. So hopefully that helps to explain.
Perfect. That clarifies for me. Thank you. Right. Did you get the order? Because I didn't. Okay.
David O'Mahony first.
Okay. So Councillor O'Mahony, then Councillor Rowland, and then Councillor Wheeler, please.
Thank you, Chair. Happy New Year, by the way. I have a question. The previous contract given out to Amy became quite apparent early on that they massively underquoted. What lessons have been learned from that have been built into this new procurement system to ensure it doesn't happen again?
Yeah, there's quite a few things. I think it can be fair to say that we're ensuring. For example, one of the areas is ensuring, as part of their financial submissions, a thorough check of the financial robustness behind their financial models. So rather than just saying it's going to cost X amount, they have to submit a financial model that we can then trace all of that back to how they came to those assumptions, and we can scrutinise that through the dialogue process to ensure that what they're submitting is sensible. I've already mentioned about the process of checking the financial robustness of the organisations to begin with before they entered the process. We've also been ensuring that if there were to be any problems, that there are robust elements of the contract around dispute resolution. We're also ensuring that the key performance indicators, the performance regime, is also robust to ensure it kind of holds them to account. But also one thing that we've definitely recognised, and we're hearing from the bidders that have been shortlisted, is that the market has changed quite significantly from the time when Amy bid for the contract. And at that point in time, there were quite a few new entrants trying to kind of come in with a low price to win contracts, to try to get their kind of foot into the market. At that point, Amy had only a few waste contracts. Since then, they have divested most of them and are trying to exit the waste market. Whereas the players that we're now working with are well-established waste companies that already have a large customer base, and they very much have told us that they are putting in sensible bids, not to just try and win market share, and it's recognised that the market has moved on to them wanting to make a sound amount of money out of the contract rather than just trying to win market share.
Just one extra bit. Those figures that come through that these companies have calculated, what do you check them against? I mean, is there some sort of central database you can look at, and there's a figure between, it's 10% variance, or how do you check they're sensible?
As well as the people who are checking them having worked in the industry for a while, so that they can kind of understand what looks sensible or not compared to what AIM is charging. We're also employed Eunomia as consultants, and they work with quite a few councils and on waste procurement. So they are also involved in helping us to scrutinise those financial models. So if there was something untoward, they would be able to highlight to us, because they have the knowledge of seeing typical prices in the market.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Councillor Rowland.
Sean, could I just come in on that? Sorry,
hang on one second. Councillor
I
Rowland.
just wanted to add on from what Sally was just saying, is that at the very beginning, when we were starting this process, Eunomia was commissioned to do essentially research into where the contracts would be going. So at a very early stage, we were given a clear understanding, and we as the councillors, as the four authorities, were given a clear understanding of what an expected contract would look like in terms of price. So that I think what we've been able to do from a very early stage is compare anything against that original report we received. That report also did highlight what actions we should be looking to take as part of the contract, which is what Sally's kind of set out, and that's how it's. So from a very early stage, we have been questioning what have we learned, especially the councillors, what have we learned from the Amy contract, and how do we prevent that? And so that's kind of been a guiding principle of this whole process as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Rowland.
This relates to, obviously, the present situation. I understand that the original arrangement, or the arrangement that was agreed that people using the tip would have to book in, has now changed. I mean, it may have come up as a question, but I just wondered whether that's being carried over, that discussion, because
So just
the feeling of those at the tip was that they were pleased that the arrangement had disappeared because it hadn't worked particularly well. So is that going to be carried on into the discussions with the new whoever takes over the contract?
Just to come back on that, the community recycling centres are not within this contract. That's the waste disposal contract from the county council. So what happened at Camberley CRC with the booking in had nothing to do with Surrey Heath, the joint authorities, or the waste collection service. It was a county council decision. However, that does raise the question of what happens in the unitary authorities. But no, that is not part of this contract. We have no say or no input over the TIP, the Community Recycling Centre.
Councillor Wheeler.
Thank you. Gosh, the timing is quite complicated, isn't it? Because we are looking at 2 D&Bs per new unitary authority. My understanding was, and I'm hoping you're going to correct me, is that we as a D&B were not in the position to award any further large contracts once the shadow authority was in existence. And linked to that, there is a supplementary query around what is essential in what we're bidding for. So historically, we've always included garden waste. Is garden waste an essential service? I know residents pay a premium for that, but is that an essential service? I'm just thinking of the complexities of having Woking, which is obviously under extreme scrutiny, and potentially, therefore, them not being enabled to make a decision about any element of this that might be discretionary. I wonder about the risk in terms of the fact that we went out to our other D&Bs and none of them expressed an interest in being involved within this contract. And so therefore, presumably, they have other contracts in place that they feel suit them well, or they're doing their own thing. Which ties up into one question, which is how much risk are we at of this not being concluded in a timely manner and not being agreed to by the new unitary authorities in time for the new contract to start before Amy wishes us a very reluctant goodbye.
I'll come in, but there will be points that I'd ask Sally to come in as well. As the contract ends in 2027, and that would be so. It's in the advice that that I've received as a portfolio holder is that it can be achieved and will be achieved. I will ask Natalie, it's just with regards to the awarding of the contract. My understanding is that we are still able to award the contract, but I'll just ask Natalie to come in on that one.
Thank you. Yes, I think what Councillor Wheeler is referring to is the Section 24 direction. So we suspect that will come in soon after the structural change order in March. And that doesn't mean that we can't make decisions. It just means there's another layer of decision making to go through on expenditure or disposals over a certain threshold. So with this contract, what that would mean is that obviously this council will be able to make the decision to award, but we will have to go through the shadow authority to have that confirmed if the Section 24 direction has been put in place.
And just to come in, I think the shadow authority, if they weren't to award this contract, would have to then immediately, more or less, find a contractor to fulfil the service. So I do understand the anxiety that you have, Councillor Wheeler, and I think it's a reasonable anxiety and a reasonable question to ask. However, I don't, in my own opinion, I'm not an expert, I will hand over to Sally in a second, that I don't believe that there is that risk, because as long as the contract is in our residents' interest, which I believe it will be, I hope, I don't see why the Shadow Authority would refuse to approve it. Your question about Woking, I think, is a fear we've all had, including the portfolio holders from Woking I've dealt with. However, the waste collection is a statutory service we must provide. So even if Woking were, I don't know, they would still have to provide the funds for a waste collection service. I will ask Sally with regards to the garden waste, is it essential? I think we are required to offer a service. Whether we charge for it or not is the other question.
Yes, thank you. I think within your question you asked about the timing of it being kind of difficult, and I think the thing being that the timing means that if the decision wasn't to be made, there wouldn't be the time to procure the service in a different way. So it's almost required that, because it's a statutory service, and the process had to start before the move to local government reorganisation because of the time it takes to procure a contract of this scale. I think that will mean that the decision will kind of have to be made at that time to ensure that statutory service continues to be delivered for residents. And I suppose that will obviously involve quite a lot of communication to ensure that everyone involved, when the new shadow authorities are set up, everyone is aware and understands that, and we obviously will need to be communicating that well. I suppose in terms of risk, I don't see that garden waste necessarily would add any additional risk, because garden waste itself kind of almost kind of washes its own face, in the sense of, because residents pay for the subscription service, it's not kind of an additional cost for councils to offer that service, because the cost of the service is paid for by the residents who choose to subscribe to it, and the waste collection providers that are bidding for the contract can easily kind of add on the additional trucks needed to operate a garden waste service, and that's kind of standard practice to do so. So I don't see that garden waste would add any risk to the process. And it obviously continues to provide the service to the residents and continues to ensure we get the recycling rates that we want to see as well.
Councillor Wheeler.
Thank you. Just to follow up, I'm assuming that there will be two legal owners of the contract, because it's going to have to be Surrey and West Surrey. And so therefore I'm assuming that we will be issuing two contracts in parallel. So I suppose what I'm saying is, I really do appreciate how much more difficult, it's a difficult thing to award and to go out to tender for anyway, but it is so much more difficult with the complexions of the Section 24 notice, the potential that one of the new authorities may not wish to go down this route, potentially. We don't know, they're not there. So yeah, well done, and let's all keep our fingers crossed.
Sorry, I think it's complex at the moment because there are currently 4 legal owners of the contract. Currently, it's the 4 authorities. So I think, yes, you are. It's moving into the new unitaries is going to be a very interesting experience, because the requirement is going to be bringing together a variety of waste collection services in a new process, which is why it's unrealistic to think that it can be solved very quickly in the new unitary authority. I can't, for example, I can't envision a single waste service being provided for West Surrey within the first term of the shadow of the new West Surrey. It's going to take a long time, because if we think Guildford still has its waste collection services in-house, Waverley is a contract, and Waverley was one of the authorities that we were hopeful were going to come into the joint waste services, but I believe with their shared management, they were looking to have one service across that area. I think when we started before LGR, but LGR then kind of began very quickly after the process started, and I think that potentially may have kind of pushed a lot of people out. So I don't believe it because it wasn't an attractive option for the other councils to join. I think the reality set in that there was going to be a big change. However, the inter-authority agreement is what will kind of manage the governance of the contracts. So yes, there will be East and West Surrey running it. That will be the mechanism to ensure that it is continued to be delivered correctly and with councillor involvement.
No one else had their hand up, but I got one question myself. So it states that we need to award it by July, August, because one of the reasons being we need to get vehicles and IT integration, etc. I totally understand that. Will the contract include the purchase of the vehicles, or will the vehicles be purchased after the contract? So the contract is either including vehicles or not including vehicles?
So the contract, it will be the authorities who will be financing the purchase of the vehicles, but it will be the contractor who will be purchasing them on our behalf to the specification that they require to deliver the service. So as part of their bids, they will be saying, we need X number of these types of trucks. And that will obviously form a part of their costs. So we'll be assessing that in terms of, cost and quality. And then the winning bidder will request the authorities to provide the capital to finance those vehicles, so they'll be owned by the authorities, but then they will operate them on our behalf. So it will be after the contract is awarded that we'll then be able to ask the winning bidder to be purchasing those on our behalf.
So follow-up question with that. I know in the past there might have been issues with some of the vehicles. Are we, as part of our spec, then specifying a specific vehicle, or are we expecting them to put what I'm saying is we don't want them buying cheap vehicles because it makes the procurement look better, because ultimately we know that that's not going to be as efficient.
Yeah. There's kind of a few different things to kind of encourage them to obviously be getting the vehicles that are fit for purpose, because they'll be responsible for maintaining them. They also will be responsible for, if they were to purchase ones that weren't suitable, kind of didn't deliver what was required, then the onus would be on them to replace them, because the contract requires them to be specifying the vehicles that are needed for the contract. Also, if they purchase vehicles that are too cheap, then they'll be off the road, and they'll have to be spending more money on maintaining them and hiring vehicles to replace them, and also then it would mean that they'd be struggling to deliver the service, and then they'd get the deductions against the key performance indicators if they're not delivering the service as required. So there's a number of different mechanisms to ensure that they're providing the correct vehicles to deliver the service at the quality that we're requiring.
Perfect. Thank you. No more questions? Thank you, everyone, for all the work on the report. You are welcome to stay, or you are equally welcome to go.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, so we've got next the financial monitoring report. Before we start, because we've got some more detailed reports coming up, I just wanted to just say something before we start. We have a busy agenda this evening and anticipate high volume of questions related to the next three items. To ensure we move through the papers efficiently and allow everyone the opportunity to speak, please keep your contributions focused on specific questions rather than lengthy statements. There will be further opportunities to share your personal views during the budget discussions at Executive and Full Council. Our purpose tonight is to drill down on the figures before us and provide through scrutiny. Now, actually, also before we started this evening, I had a quick conversation with Councillor Rowlands. Obviously, the budget is quite a weighty document. So I appreciate the budget is quite lengthy and has taken a lot of time and effort for the finance team to pull together, which I would like to thank them all for. Whilst we're discussing it tonight, there will also be opportunity to discuss it at the executive on Tuesday the 10th, full council on Wednesday the 18th, and all members have just been invited to a budget briefing on Thursday the 12th. So there will be ample opportunity to discuss this in other forums. So if we don't get through everything tonight, then obviously we will have other opportunities to discuss it. That being said, that brings us on to item number 6, which is the financial monitoring report. Is it Councillor McIntyre?
Thank you. And just on my thunder, because I was also going to thank the finance team for all their hard work and the volume of numbers and the detail in there. There will, in fact, that's for budget. Let's focus on monitoring for a minute. Right, so obviously there is a lot of numbers in here, so I'm not going to read through all of them. This is the Q3 financial monitoring report, which also then predicts or gives the outturn for the year-end figures, which is obviously useful given that we're about to talk about then the supplementary budget. Direct costs are looking to come in around about 4 million less than the original budget and working budget. That is about 5 million less than last year, largely down to all the hard work of officers in reducing their costs. We have a use of reserves for this year at about 2.5 million less than budgeted for as a result of the direct costs coming down. This leaves around about 17 million in total for the reserves, with 500,000 in the general fund. Capital programme is 9 million down from the original plan, which is due to a number of different factors, but obviously most years we end up having to reprofile the capital programme for a number of different reasons, which can be frustrating, but is also generally, it unfortunately is sort of what happens year on year. We are recommending reprofiling a number of those capital budgets, but also removal of anything that has been completed. So there are a few movements in that section. Any questions?
Okay, so we have Councillor Malbagadam and Councillor Wilson first. Microphone.
Let me start by thanking Ms. Radford and her team for an excellent set of documents, which has actually highlighted certain things which we'll try and tackle here. Unfortunately, both of them link both your documents, but I'll try and stick to the financial monitoring side first, and we'll go. It seems the rental income, the car parking income, all the incomes are net of something. So no one can actually see the trend within the numbers. Because it shows, for example, in car parking income, 214,000 odd pounds came in as a rebate. Did it actually lose money? By the way, thank you very much for sending me the documents, which I received only an hour before the meeting. But I haven't looked at it properly, so I'm asking the questions for today. So it's 214,000 as we gained. Did we lose the footfall, B, the car parking rent? How much of the rent fall in car parking related to the increase in rent, which this administration has imposed for about a year and a half or 2 years now? Yeah, we don't know. I'd like to understand that because it's very important for forecasting, I would have thought. And the other one, of course, is rent. I'm just flicking through my numbers now. And assumptions, yeah, you have made here, would it be carried into the forecast as well? On the rent, looks as if we are kind of breaking even, but it doesn't look like it's breaking even. So there is some sort of a set off somewhere, which I can't make out. So did we actually lose real rent, or did we actually compensate that through something else? When the numbers are so it's been netted a few times, because if you are losing rent, it's not a lecture, my question is there. If you are losing rent, the policy which this administration has undertaken to let the property out at long leases or, short leases with rent-free period, we like, as a councillor and the scrutiny committee, like to understand how many leases have gone out in such way. All that information is required. It doesn't show immediately. For the moment, I'll leave it as is. I'm sure I'll come back to you later. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Mavagin,
On the rent, yes, I know it is a bit confusing, and because you've also got the industrial estates rents, and so it's broken down a little bit more in the budget reports. The reason it's not kind of really showing this financial year is because we've had some back rent that's been payable. So when there's been a lease negotiation that hasn't been done, straight away, when the lease negotiations continue, then they have to pay back rent. So you can only account for that when you receive it. So that does kind of skew things as well. Parking income, I think it's difficult. It's difficult to identify. We'd need separate. We wouldn't necessarily identify it in the figures, linking through to the footfall. So that would be a separate, kind of separate analysis. I think what you received earlier probably did have that. That was kind of the footfall for the square, and then the car parking and seeing, the big events. But we can certainly look to perhaps enhance some of that reporting. I think, there's more detail in the budget report, but I hear you. It is slightly confusing, and it does appear that things are hidden because we're reporting stuff at that kind of higher level as opposed to bottom level detail.
Chair, a very quick supplement. Particularly on the retail, I'm concerned about the retail because these assets underperforming? That's my real issue here. Because if you don't understand retail and you're renting something with long, void period, it looks as if there's a tenant, but rent is not coming through. These are things the scrutiny committee definitely would like to see. Thank you.
thank you, Councillor Mavagin. Sorry?
I can go on the parking.
I'll go on. Yeah. Sorry, Mr. Breeden, I didn't see your hand up because I wasn't looking at the right screen. It's behind me. Did you want to say something on this?
Yes, to provide a little extra context, there's been 7 months, if you like for like comparisons post the car park increase in April of 2024. So the months of May through to November, I've got the data in front of me, same data that has been shared. In those 7 months, the number of car parking visits was up in 6 of the 7 months. So it doesn't seem that the car parking increase in April of 2024 has caused a fall in car park usage.
And then Mr. Stevens.
Thank you, Chair. Mr. Breeden's covered off some of what I was going to say, but actually, Councillor Malvagan, some of the information that you've been provided draws a comparison between the car parking frequencies or instances for Main Square car park against the atrium, and you see actually we're performing better than the atrium car park. So I do not believe that actually the cost is a factor in terms of any reduction at all in parking behaviours in the town centre.
Like I said earlier, I got it only an hour before the meeting. I looked at it. I'm sure I will look at it and come back to Mrs. Radford if required.
Thank you. Councillor Wilson.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you very much for the report. On this one, I've just got one comment and one question. Page 33 on procurement, it's quite impressive change round in procurement. I think it calls it reinvention. A lot of savings and benefits have happened there for the Council's finances, so that is a success. And then the question is on page 25, paragraph 1.10, the third bullet point, it says extended producer responsibility grant of £890,000 now being allocated to services. Can you just sort of explain what that is and why the council has received such a big grant? Thank you.
You can do the detail of the grant. So yeah, the reason it's kind of now under services is when we originally put the grant in, we did it as a general grant. We didn't know the conditions of the grant and that, but it is a specific service to cover service cost. So in the budget, you'll see sort of just a grant line, but it should have been shown in the direct cost of services. So it was shown in the funding line before, but now it's showing in the direct costs. That's partly the reason there's a sort of net off when you look at the under and overspends on that particular one. And Mr. Stevens can talk to you about what the actual grant.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor Wilson. So extended producer responsibility was a government initiative whereby there's a tax or a levy imposed on manufacturers of plastics and other materials that are more challenging to recycle. That levy is then transferred to local authorities who have to contend with the collection of that waste, whether that be through public litter bins, litter collection, or actually the refuse collection services that we deploy on behalf of residents. So effectively it's taking it from the manufacturer and then transferring it to the authorities that have to contend with that waste.
Councillor Rowland.
Thank you, Chair. Could I just ask, these are probably naive questions, but why do we need £17 million in reserve? And that seems to be, I'm puzzled by that. And on 1.6, the underspend that talks about, why would, how has that come about, seeing that the council's budget is pretty tight at the moment? How we arrived at an underspend in that way? Ciphering my questions here. 1.226. Find it. The question of the amount we're keeping in reserve. Why are we actually required or having so much in reserve in that way? Can I have that explained? 1.29.
It's more the makeup of the reserves. So we have usable and unusable reserves, and within that you've got the earmarked reserves and then what can be allocated out. So Mr. Raffel can go through the more detail, but it's not a whole pot of reserves that's just available to be used for any purpose. That's what we're using. That's the general fund and the usable non-earmarked part that we are very short of, that is used for our revenue budget.
Thank you.
Have you got some more questions?
Yeah, the forecast, the outrun of 8.23 million against an estimate of 17.652. That's pretty wide of a mark, isn't it? Seems to be that seems to be such a big gap. Can you just explain that to us a little bit? 1.38. the role of interest payments, I'd like to actually see if we could find out a bit more about that, and whether that's a factor of moving around the money we have on investments. We're aware of the level of interest payments being demanded. 1.40, the role of procurements. How is that operating at the moment in terms of financial position that the council is involved in? Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Rowlands. Did you get all of those? If you didn't, I think he has.
Okay, I think so. I think so. Yeah, Councillor McIntyre answered your question on reserves. Okay, so the underspend on the budget and how's that come about? So primarily, the reason we're underspent on services is because we've delivered early some of our transformation savings over what we'd included in the budget. So we're a bit more prudent in how we budgeted, but actually services were able to come forward much sooner with some of the monetary savings. So that's why we've got an underspend this year. 1.38, which is the investment projected interest cost of 7 million. So we've got obviously various long-term loans that we know what we're going to be paying on them, so that's factored into there. And then we make an assumption using our cash flow forecast for the rest of the financial year, and make assumptions around how much we're going to spend on our capital programme, what receipts we may get in over and above the general revenue day to day, and then project forward some of the borrowing cost. We're quite prudent in how we budget for our short-term cost of borrowing, because it's a little bit, you never quite know how the local authority to local authority market is going to move. It doesn't necessarily move with base rate, it's more on a supply and demand basis. So there is always an opportunity there. So we budget over base rate, but if base rate falls quicker than what we had in our budgeted assumptions, then obviously we will have some benefit there. So having had slippage in the capital programme, which comes on to the next one of your other questions, that in turn, in theory, reduces the borrowing interest cost a little bit. The capital programme, we make an assumption around what we're going to spend on projects, and then at the end of the financial year, anything that's left in projects that aren't yet completed, they get rolled over as well, which is why that was quite a high amount. So as we go through the year, the delivery of those, there'll be things that are delayed from various factors, from, I don't know, utilities companies, we couldn't, get something in as quick. So we constantly re-looking at the profile of the spend. So as we go through the financial year, we're obviously more certain on spend, which is why generally as you go through the quarters, when you get to quarter three, you're more aware of actually what will be physically spent this financial year. So that's why that's come down. And slippage on the capital programme is, I say it's a common problem for all local authorities. I mean, the good days when we had money, everyone wanted to spend on their capital programmes. Now borrowing costs are much higher and people don't have so much money. People don't want to spend on their capital programmes and things slip. So it's kind of, no-win situation whether you slip or you don't slip. But it's very, very common to have that slippage, partly because you're ambitious about what you want to do and how you can do it, but there obviously are other factors that impinge on that delivery. The role of procurement, we've got a very, very small procurement team. Historically, we didn't have a particularly structured procurement team. We've got a lot more structure in the processes now that we've got in the council. So there's a lot more sort of oversight. We've got the Procurement Act 2023 that came in last year, and that needs there's a lot more governance around how we need to take on the procurements, what we need to issue in the markets, transparency and that kind of thing. So it's quite a structured, robust set of processes we've got here, and we updated the sort of contract standing orders and the financial regulations as well. So there's still a long way to go, and we need to kind of instill the procurement governance and processes. But again, that's a common thing across all sort of organisations, local authorities, that you know, it's quite hard sometimes to do all that paperwork when you just want to go out and get something. But the government are a lot stricter now themselves on local authorities as well.
Thank you. I see your hand, but I'm going to ask a few questions first, if that's okay. So Councillor Magnum is next. So I've got no, hang on 1 second, 2 questions. That one we can skip. That one can we skip. So I've actually got 2 questions, both on page 25. So page 25, forecast shortfall in planning application income of £610,000, which is a lot of money. What are we? Do we know a reason why it's dropped? I know Mr. Bartlett's not here, so I don't know if that's something we're aware of, because obviously it's a lot of money, and that's obviously a key income stream. And the second question is related to 25 as well, actually. We've got the big part of the graph at the top, service delivery review and choose to leave, and it's got a total of 1.6 million. Have we got an idea of what part of that number is choose to leave? Thank you.
Yes. So on the planning income, I think we'd made some budget assumptions around the amount of sort of the larger planning applications that may come through based on historical, to kind of smooth things out, and obviously that hasn't quite happened. And there has been a sort of general dip in the market as well. Interestingly, those in Surrey, one in particular I can think of because it's the only person that I know about, they've had their local plan adopted last year sometime, and they've actually had quite a lot. They haven't seen that, but over the country, there is a reduction in planning applications, and quite a lot of people are seeing that same trend. Transformation, I don't have that to hand. I'm not sure. We might have to come back to you on that particular one, unless Sarah knows.
There was quite a lot of crossover between the service delivery review savings and the choose to leave. So we haven't reported them separately to date. We could certainly let you know the number of posts and that kind of thing, if that's helpful.
Perfect. Thank you. Councillor Mountbatten.
Thank you, Chair. You asked a question.
Okay. Has anyone else got a question referenced this? Oh, yes, Councillor Whitcroft.
I don't really have a question as such, but I just want to make a comment, if I might. Bearing in mind that there's been a fair amount of, how can I put this, nitpicking would be unfair, but a certain amount of digging into the weeds of the thing. Over the years, I've seen an awful lot of these tabulations. I shall now bore you for the next 10 minutes going into the history of the thing, or perhaps not. But when I looked at these figures for the first time, my first thought was disbelief, to be perfectly blunt with you, because over the years one has become used to situations where the budgets have generally been overspent for whatever reasons. The reserves have usually been eroded more than had been planned, and it's interesting to hear people talk about, oh, why do we need all these reserves? A couple of years ago, we were going on about we haven't got any reserves. It's all a disaster. And it's a shame Councillor Malvaganam has left the chamber at this point, but he probably wouldn't want to hear these comments anyway. So on this occasion, I had to there's a little footnote here, which says figures that are red and in brackets is net income or an underspend or overachievement of income contributing to the revenue account, and those in black are expenditure items being a cost to the revenue account. I'm used to a situation where it's generally the other way around. And yet in this tabulation, at the beginning of this report, we have a situation which shows, in my opinion, something which borders on the incredible, really, in the sense that these numbers have been achieved at a time when everybody knows that local government generally is suffering desperately, where we have other authorities not exactly a million miles away from here who are wallowing in debt to the point where they're being run by the government. And yet we've got these figures here which, in anybody's terms, are very positive. And I think as a committee, we should be actually recognising that. Okay, we can talk about the parking figures, although it has to be said that the evidence before us so far would appear to indicate that the parking situation is much better than people had anticipated it would be. And we can talk about things like, well, the income from the planning is not mumble. Maybe that's got something to do with the fact that the economy generally is up the creek. I could describe the creek in a certain manner, but I won't. So I just want to recognise the work that's been done by the officers in particular, but also, to be fair, to the executive as well, who have come up with this situation, which, as far as I'm concerned, is very surprising. Because if somebody had told me 12 months ago that this was going to be the outcome that we'll be looking at tonight, I would have laughed in their face, because I didn't think it would be achievable. But it is achievable, and that needs to be recognised, and the people concerned need to be congratulated, not carped at. Thank you.
Totally take on board your comments, but this actually is a scrutiny committee. And what we are doing tonight is scrutinising the figures. We could equally be told off if we just said, yeah, everything's fine, and not scrutinise it. So I'm sure, and I always thank the officers for pulling these reports together, because they actually have to bring them to my committee before they have to bring them to the executive generally, and that means they have to bring them in a lot earlier. So I do appreciate the time and effort they put in to do it, and I always thank them for it. But if we didn't scrutinise them, we would also be hit over the head for scrutinising them. And I'm sure the leader at executive will thank everybody for all their hard work pulling it together. But I totally take on board your comments, Councillor Whitcroft. Did you want to come back?
Yeah, just very briefly. The scrutiny function is obviously critically important, very, very important indeed. But it is a bit of a two-way thing as well. And I fully accept on your part, Chair, that you pay due respect to the officers and the job that they've done, and I fully recognise that on your part. It's not always true of everybody. Let's put it that way. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Whitcroft. Councillor Manvagan, and then I'm going to
Point of
take...
order, sir. So, I did thank the officers twice. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay.
A point of exclamation. Nobody suggested otherwise.
Okay, we're going to move on. Unless anybody's got any other questions reference to this particular paper. No, brilliant. Because I've actually got a whole pile of questions. I was about to ask them for this paper. Have we got to... You're looking at me as if I've got to say recommendation, haven't I? This is the bit I always get wrong. Hang on one second. Where is the recommend... Where are the recommendations? 41. Bear with me just 1 second. That page 41, that's the annual review. We haven't got to that one yet, have we? Wow, I thought I hadn't missed it. Because there isn't any on page... Is there?
On page
22, thank you. They weren't on the front page like they normally are, thank you. Right, so just as a committee, the committee is advised to resolve that the predicted forecast for the full year outturn be noted. The spending commitment against the approved capital programme up to 30 November, as well as projected profile spend 25-26 financial year, be noted. It be recommended to the Executive that the proposed reprofiling the capital budgets to the future years to be approved as detailed in section 1.3, and the proposed removal of the capital budgets due to scheme completion be approved as detailed in section 1.31. Are we happy to agree that, committee? Thank you. I should have done what the leader did the other night and say, do I just say this? Okay. Okay, thank you. Right, so that brings us on to item 7, which is the annual review budget 26-27, medium-term financial strategy 27-28 to 29-30. Is that you, Councillor McIntyre, as well? Over to you.
Thank you, Chair. So the really exciting report, I can say that because Councillor Rise is not next to me currently. Right, so there is a lot of detail in this report and there are a lot of numbers. So I am not going to go through every number because I think everyone's going to be focusing on different parts of the report, the MTFS and the budget. I also think it's important to note that to the Chair's point about having to get things ready for this committee, there is still an element of potential movement in some of the numbers as things are firmed up. So we wanted to make sure this came here and took into account everyone's feedback so that everything could be updated at the same time. So if we get through Executive and Council and have slightly different numbers, there is good reason for that. There will be nothing material that we are aware of at the moment. Right, so this is looking at the budget and the MTFS for 26-27, which is obviously before West Surrey unitary comes into effect, but it also has the following 27-28 and 28-29 and 29-30 included, as we have done previously, in order to help inform the West Surrey unitary budget process going forward. I think it's also important that we do that for transparency and openness with our future bedfellows, for want of a better phrase. So important numbers, I guess. Net cost of services is just over 18 million for next year. That is against the outturn that we've just presented at just over 17 million. So there is some growth within those figures. There is a 2.4 million drawdown on reserves in the budget in order to make sure it's a balanced budget. We're basing the council tax uplift at the maximum of 2.99%, as we have done in previous years, which is still obviously under inflationary rises in our costs. Capital bids have gone in at just over 7 million. I think it's probably important to note, we've already talked about planning income is down, property income is down, and our contract costs are going up. As we predicted in previous years that they would do. It's essentially, the section 151 comment says, words to the effect of reserves are barely sufficient for us to get through this. And they are, in terms of numbers, sufficient, and our books are balanced. I think it's also really important to note, though, that a lot of the savings in here and the reduction of growth potential from a cost point of view is due to the transformation programme that has been in place for last year and going forward. There's a lot of work being done on that, and there's still a lot more work to be done. And at any point, something could happen where those targets aren't met. And for me, that is our biggest risk. We need to keep on top of that and make sure that those commitments are made, and then we will be in a good position. It also ensures that we're fit and efficient ahead of the LGR implementation, which goes back to our point about transparency and making sure that West Surrey Unitary Council is fully aware of our financial position and the challenges that we face going into that partnership. Any questions?
Before we start, and Councillor Wilson had his hand up first, and then Councillor Baghdad. Can I ask, if you're asking a specific question, you highlight which page it's on, because there is lots of details. And I will reiterate, I thank you for bringing this to this committee first. And I appreciate what you're saying about maybe some of the figures may change before we get to executive. Okay, so Councillor Wilson and Councillor Wagner.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, thank you for the massive report, and it's really well written, and I found it very difficult to sort of pick anything or have any problems with it at all. Want to direct everyone's attention to page 63, right at the top, paragraph 3.4, and I think the point here is that this time last year, February 2025, we thought that the forecast would be that we'd run out of the usable type of reserves during the next financial year before the council is abolished. And it says, due to the huge effort, this position has moved on a year to be during 27-28. So that is clearly a success, and it's a tribute to the transformation programme that it's done that, because I think the important point is that the public who are served by Surrey Heath Borough Council will be served by the successor council. So we can't just leave a place in a wreck and expect them to pick it up, because the public that we serve will be the ones that suffer. So, I think the other point is we're not the only council that's going to become part of West Surrey Council that is in financial, well, on the brink. So the day one of West Surrey Council is going to require a similar sort of process to try and keep it going. And I think Surrey Heath has shown that we have the leadership and the officers who can take on a challenge like this. And I hope you all get the chance to. Just one point that I wanted to pick up that I did think maybe a typo or something. Page 65, talking about the level of business rates, it says that the business rates are predicted to be 1.5 million, roughly, in the next financial year. Page 75, it says it's 2.5 million. Is that a typo, or is it just some explanation?
That's deliberate. No, it's not a typo. The differential is the current assumed surplus on the collection fund, but that figure, and I was toying with the idea of showing that or not showing it, but actually that figure is going to change, we assume. So yeah, that's basically the differential. So our baseline is the 1.5, but hopefully we'll have £1 million worth of surplus, but that could change either way, so that could change these figures quite a bit. So, well spotted.
Just to clarify, it's going to be at least the bottom figure. It could be the top. It potentially could be the top.
Yeah, the 1.5 is the base that we're getting, and then we're currently working out what our assumed surplus deficit on the collection fund will be, and then that will be factored through.
Thank you. Councillor Malvagan.
Thank you, Chair. I mean, to be honest, I'm gone beyond 27, because after that it becomes a kind of a irrelevant game. So 27, we are coming within, so I'm delighted. Well done to Nick Stevens and his team, particularly actually pulling the whole thing together and making sure that we come within the budget. Because 3 years ago we were told we'll go bust within 1.5 years. Here we are, applauding the officers for all the hard work that has gone in. So thank you again, officers, for all the hard work you did. Only thing I have to say is the budget growth is, for me, it still comes back to mainly rental income. That rental income, I think, is an important factor. I don't know how Martin Breeden and his team are going to address that within a 1-year period. Because today, when you speak to someone, they literally now are clubbing us with Aldershot and Farnborough. It's a sad state of affairs when it comes to retail. So we need to actually somehow or other make this change. It's a sea change, but we have to make the change, because we have got 2, I would say, anchor stores within the town centre. If one of them leave, we are actually in big trouble. This is the problem we have. All the anchor stores have gone. I'm saying this genuinely because of my experience in retail. Anchor stores go, the town is dead. Currently, we have got one alleyway, I call it the discount alleyway, full of discount stores. In retail, when we did it, I would never put our product into a discount town center. So that's up to Martin Braden, Nick Stevens, the CEO, to actually deal with this matter. It's a very important one, but you've got only 1 year to do it. Thank you very much.
Mr. Breeden, did you want to say something? Mr. Stevens suggested I asked you, by the way.
That's absolutely fine. I think it's true. Leasing shops in towns such as Camberley is difficult. We have had a number of successes, but we've also had a number of failures. I draw people's attention to the little table on page 70 of the pack, where one can see the growth in the commercial, which is really the industrial portfolio, some growth in the office portfolio, which is really theta as some rent-free periods burn off, and then the fall in retail income. And then if we go back a few pages to page paragraph 5.4 on page 66, there we can see some of the reasoning behind the falls that were perhaps not budgeted when we did this exercise a year ago. So when you look at that big like-for-like fall, it's really against the same prediction that was made a year ago. So there's some vacancies and insolvencies totaling 760,000. There's new lettings which have totaled 489,000, which is a sign of the successes that the team has been able to deliver and the work that the team has done delivering that new income. And then that reference to a fall of 370,000 on rebasing existing leases when they've been renewed to what are current market levels. So those are some of the indications of the difficulties we've experienced and the work that we've done to offset that. What are we doing about that? We've got regular and diligent work with our leasing agents, both national and local, and our own team endeavours. We've got a good series of events which we work hand in glove with the bid and with the atrium now under new ownership. So everyone is working together to promote Camberley more broadly, and we can see the success of those coming through. And we've also, on our marketing efforts in terms of engaging with customers, we've grown all of our metrics on our media engagement, social media engagement, and other marketing metrics. So there are positive pieces of work that have been doing to address that. I mean, where do we think that there's going to be a fundamental change? I think that the opportunities are in the evening economy. It's very difficult, towns like Camberley are going to be very difficult to get any significant apparel brands coming in, and new brands. But I think we can do more if we get the environment right, and deliver some of these regeneration projects, that we can create an environment where we can build the evening economy. And also in our Vision for Camberley document, which is on our website and was widely consulted upon, it's also about delivering those regeneration projects to deliver homes in the town centre, which will bring more customers, more life, more vibrancy, and in turn that will grow sales for businesses. So those are really the elements that we need to focus on as a council to try and deliver.
Oh, yeah, hang on. Yeah, thank you, Mr. Breeden. Councillor McIntyre.
So I just wanted to acknowledge how much work Mr. Reed and his team is doing in this area, because it gets quite a hard time for many of us on our monthly calls. I'm also conscious, though, that we quite often talk about not talking Camberley down, which I am really keen to make sure doesn't come into tonight's chamber. On a positive note, Greg's upsize, which is in paragraph 5.4, I'm not sure who's been to it, but I was there the other day. It's an exceptional upsize, very busy, lovely environment. And so more of that we can do, the better.
I bumped into the centre manager today walking through town. He was upping Greg's as well for his bacon roll and his coffee in the morning. Councillor Melbag, we've started now. Councillor Melbagadam, Councillor Wilson and then Councillor Rowland.
Just to thank Martin Braden for the hard work you put in, but you have a uphill task though, and I don't know how we are going to do it. That was my sort of question mark. Don't want it answered. It's got to be actioned. And I agree with Councillor McIntyre. There's a reason you were saying, Councillor McIntyre, every meeting I come, I have a go at certain councillors who keep talking the council, the borough down. They don't seem to understand the real world. The real world is you talk your own town down, retail falls. Too late, it's 3 years gone. And one more year, hopefully, they will not open their mouth.
Councillor Wilson.
Thank you. Yeah, if I'm allowed to open my mouth. This isn't a criticism, it's just to help with, as a scrutiny function, to help perhaps with the presentation. So page 64, there's a bar chart and it shows the parish as 1%, which is probably true if you add up the whole borough, because not everybody has a parish. So I think the parish of my council tax is about 3%. So I don't know if the chart should be kind of labelled to show that if you have a parish, it's about 2 or 3%. If you don't have a parish, obviously it's 0% of your council tax. And then the next table, I know it's not. It says it's not finished yet. I've always thought that the adult social care percentage increase is confusing for people, because that's 2% of the entire precept from Surrey County Council, and for the first time, I think ever, the council tax bill that we got last year actually was clear about what it was a percentage of. So I think that table might be slightly misleading. And to be incredibly picky, the Surrey Heath Borough Council percentage increase, if you round it to 2 decimal places, it's 3.00%, because it's 2.997. So, I mean, I don't know if that matters, but it just might make it easier for people to understand. Thank you.
That is very picky. No, it's 3%, but we will go to 299 for that rounding. So that just gives us that tiny couple of pence leeway, if you like. In terms of the adult social care element, last year was the first year that they didn't have to show it separately on the bill. Previously, they did have to, which is why we showed it this way. And this comes from the other budget reports, which is why. So that's obviously last year's table in there, because we don't have any idea on the actual figures as yet. So we will probably add it together, because Surrey County Council will probably add it together as well. And yeah, that graph, that's just the total split of the income stream. So that's just it's just a kind of it's more of an estimate around how much Surrey Heath gets compared to the others, as opposed to the parishes. If you see what I mean, that's more context around it.
Thank you, Councillor Rowland.
Thank you, Chair. Page 46. I know it's just been covered in the discussion about retailing, but it does indicate that some of the moves have been countervailed by the fact of the retail situation in the town. I welcome observations on that we're making moves, but in fact, the serious situation about retailing has appeared to defeat them to some extent. Again, on page 46, 10.2, a review of concessionary services. The savings made I'd like to comment, savings made in not fulfilling posts, are we able to maintain a reasonable quality making those savings on our discretionary services? Because it's all right to isolate what appear to be discretionary services, but how much in reality do they impinge on the ones regarded as being essential? Moving on to 6.14, I'll get that right. So, gosh. The effect of scale of look at this. I think looking at the capital receipts, I'd like to have an observation on that. And then finally on 6.15, there's a comment on the role of reserves. They always seem to have a mysterious process as far as we're concerned. How are they operating, as it's suggested here, taking the pressure off some of our basic activities? Thank you.
Do you want to take the critical mass one then? Okay.
So I am not going to even endeavour to answer any of your financial questions, Councillor Rowlands. That is not my role. It's not my skill set, and I will get attacked by not only the portfolio holder, but also the Section 151 officer if I even dare. I'll come back on the question that you asked about the size of the organisation and perhaps the quality of discretionary services. And I'd like to thank the councillors for their positive commentary about the officers, and I always feel like a fraud when my name is mentioned when it comes to transformation or successes in this council, because it's nothing to do with me. It's everything to do with the management team and the brilliance of our officers across the entire council in coming up with the savings and then delivering upon them, and that includes Ms Bainbridge and everyone else you see in the chamber, and also the support and oversight, advice and wisdom of councillors, whether that be in the administration or in scrutiny. So thank you to you as well. We are acutely aware that through Choose to Leave and through the transformation programme in its entirety, that there is a critical mass of officers or staff or resource beneath which we cannot go because that places a significant risk on our services, statutory or discretionary. And we've been very careful to consider that as an officer cohort, and we feel we're now at the right size, and we always talked about right sizing of the organisation. We are grateful to partners as well, such as Runnymede Borough Council, for the way in which they have found savings within community services without impacting on those services in a detrimental way. So the short response, Councillor Rowlands, is we are comfortable that the quality of our services is not dropping because of a reduction in resource or a reduction in cost.
Reserves. So we've categorised our reserves into kind of two pots, kind of usable earmark reserves and specific earmark reserves. The majority of the money is in the specific earmarked reserves, and the majority of that is made up of SANG receipts that we've had, which we have to hold for in perpetuity for future spend on our special protection area sites. Some of our services, we use the reserves to smooth some of the expenditure, so we'll make contributions. As an example, this isn't one that we've necessarily done, but as an example, take elections, they're every 4 years here. We could use a reserve to put away, a quarter of that spend each year, and then there is no, bigger spend, if you like, in that year. So we use reserve to smooth that spend out. And we're obviously heavily been using reserves over the last few years to fund the deficit per year as well, which is why we're running out. Capital receipts, there's been one of the elements of the transformation programme was about assets, reviewing assets, rationalisation of assets, and there's an assumption around some of the capital receipts that we're going to get. Obviously, individual committee reports has gone to individual committee meetings and various groups, Property and Economic Development Working Group has discussed this in depth. So I can't go into any specific detail on those individual ones, but obviously councillors will be aware that we have sold a few assets, properties, some are on the market now, and then there's obviously other ones in the pipeline that we've deemed that actually are surplus to the council's requirement, and the council's requirement being for our day-to-day services. It's things that we're holding that actually do we actually really need to hold. And that's been something that lots and lots of other authorities have been doing. In fact, probably every authority has been doing that. And your first point about retail, what was that question? That might be something Mr. Breeden needs to answer.
Gets to answer.
I think Councillor was really acknowledging the reference that I've already made to the data on page 64 about the difficulty of the ups and the downs of income. Actually, on page 66 in paragraph 5.4.
Yes, I mean that.
I think that kind of goes to your point that you were making, Councillor Rowlands, about the difficulties of that whilst we're working hard to deliver new income and new lettings and renew leases, at the other end of the centre, there's other tenants that are becoming insolvent or vacating at the end of their leases.
Was there any other? Was there any other points that were outstanding? Have you covered off all those? Okay, so I've got. Obviously, I've got two questions and I hadn't seen any more hands. Right, so I'll ask my two questions first. So one of them, I think both of them I actually might have mentioned in the chair's briefing. So one relates to page 58. I'm going to have to bring it up because I can't remember. I've written it down, but I can't remember what the heck it was. Oh yes, I remember what it was. So 58, 2.6. So I think it's an interesting thing, isn't it? It's called the Fair Funding Scheme. Except what's fair about it? So we are going to be seeing a reduction of 28.92% overall of 1.3 million due to the fair funding. What does, I think you gave it to me when we spoke, but what do we actually get as this fair funding? What value, because I couldn't see it, so what actual money do we actually get?
Just, I suppose, a little bit of, I've mentioned it in the report, but the Fair Funding Review is something that the government have been talking about for a very long time. And since 2017-18, when we last had a multi-year finance settlement, they've been promising, and actually the government have now put this forward. So it's basically restructuring the way local government is financed across the board. They're taking more importance of deprivation and sort of how the strength of the councils in terms of your tax base and your business rates and things like that. So we had always predicted Surrey as a whole would do very poorly, and that's rung true. So for us, yes, we're seeing just under a 29% funding reduction, which over the 3 years is 1.3 million. So percentage-wise, it's huge, but because we got very little in the first place, that percentage is not much of not much. So from that point of view, the other thing to note that what the government are doing, and that's one reason why there is that reduction over the 3 years, is they've got a funding floor in place. So councils won't lose out in the first year, so 26, 27, and then it's about a third reduction each year. What quite happens at the end of that, because for some authorities that's quite big, but we're a tiny district, so you know the numbers are relative. Obviously, has a big impact for us, but the numbers themselves are relatively small. But it's kind of as we expected, unfortunately.
Okay, and my last question relates to page 74. And I'm sure anyone that knows me will not be surprised by a question relating to Lawrence Lodge. G, temporary accommodation. We all know that Lawrence Lodge is going to shut down at some point in the millennium. We're budgeting £900,000 for the financial year because we're going to have to cover the accommodation of homeless people that would have been put into Lawrence Lodge. We believe Lawrence Lodge is going to shut down in June. So is that, I mean, I'm guessing that's putting up people in hotels in Staines or wherever it is we normally do it. Is there an alternative to that where I think when we discussed it, there's a possibility that our provider would be looking for other options, because that's a massive amount. And I'm not saying we shouldn't be doing it, because these are people that are homeless and it's emergency accommodation. It's emergency accommodation for a reason. But that's a lot of money. What have we got other things that we can possibly do to reduce that?
Thankfully, that is just a risk item. It isn't actually in our figures. I think that would be highlighted much more if it was in our figures. Yeah. So what we wanted to put in here is, yes, we are expecting Lawrence Lodge to end. And the worst case scenario is if there is no other provider, there's no other similar alternative, we would have to house people in B&B, hotels or what have you. And the estimated cost of that is around 900,000. But there are conversations happening, so we didn't want, that's why we put this in here as a risk, to say, anything can happen, but this would be the likely outcome if none of those kind of paid off, if you like.
So have we got anything in the budget for cost covering of the, because we know it's going to shut up, so we're going to have to, something's going to have to happen. So have we got anything in the budget for that?
We've got the status quo at the moment because we don't know any different.
Okay. Thank you. Who was?
I was just going to make a very small point on that. Obviously, we've made the point about the budget being really finely balanced. It won't take many of items like this that will cause problems. So it's definitely a risk that needs to be highlighted. And there's an argument to say maybe we do put the worst case scenario in. But I think the fact that it's being called out is probably enough because it's less likely to be needed.
And Mr. Stevens?
I'm going to pass to Ms McCubbin in a second. It comes down to what Councillor McIntyre was saying, which is we do have a reasonable level of confidence about either the continuation of Lawrence Lodge for a short duration beyond June, or alternatives being brought forward by Accent as our main provider within the borough. So I'm not sure if you wanted to add any more.
Thank you. I was just going to add a tiny sort of like element of reassurance in that the team are working exceptionally closely with Accent. There's actually a meeting tomorrow, so don't have hot off the press update for you. But I know that they're considering a site in Windlesham. I also know that at the moment we're not at full capacity, and actually that's an option that works could commence in June and not shut down entirely. So there'll be a smaller provision within Lawrence Lodge while works are undertaken and we still look to source other alternatives. So we are working exceptionally closely. So just to provide reassurance on sort of the figures that are before you, that is worst case scenario, but we are very much working to not get there and use those figures. Thank you.
Thank you. That's good to hear. Right, so I've got Councillor Wilson, then Councillor Rowlands, and I'm going to stop it after that. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. This is my last question. It's about the potential indicators. So it's like the bottom of page 98, but really the table at the top of page 99. Obviously, these are important indicators to monitor financial stability, and that's why they've been chosen. So it looks to me like the MRP is projected to go up, and obviously that's quite a complicated calculation. So it's not like a straight line 2% of the CFR. So that's going to fluctuate depending on what is used to calculate the MRP, the different assets and things. But just looking at 27-28, the financing cost as a percentage of the net revenue stream goes up to 72%, and then 81%, then 88%. I mean, I know we're not going to be here at this point, the council won't exist at this point, but that kind of shows that it's not stable and something has to be done basically in the next year to stop that from happening. You can't spend 88% of your income on financing your debt. That's just not viable. Am I looking at this the right way, and is there any kind of explanation for why it just gets that big?
No, you hit the nail on the head. That's exactly what this is saying. And this prudential indicator is obviously one thing that, you know, SIPFA are really keen on. Obviously, we have to produce this. Yes, the increasing in the MRP, absolutely, that is one of the reasons. The big reason really is the assumptions around our future borrowing cost and level of borrowing for short-term borrowing. So as we utilise our reserves for balancing the budget, we no longer have that cash essentially. So we then have to start refinancing our internal borrowing to the difference between our external borrowing and what our capital financing requirement is. So we'd essentially, this is moving us more up to kind of 100% borrowing for our capital programme, whereas at the moment we've been using our reserves. So there's heavy assumptions in there, and I'd say they're well, I'm going to say, you never say never, but I'd say they're quite prudent. And generally the way I tend to put these together, it gets a bit better as you go through because there's slippage, and you don't have your MRP in the same profile because things have slipped and therefore the borrowing has slipped as well. And we take advantage of good deals if we can. So if there's something that's lower than what our weighted average borrowing is, then obviously that's going to reduce that down further. One thing that is also in the strategy is around restructuring some of our borrowing, which obviously will be beneficial as well. So if there are any opportunities, historically there were never really that many opportunities. But actually, there are things out there. Other councils are doing them within Surrey and taking advantage of some of those opportunities as well. So obviously, we've never really had capital receipts before either. So as that programme, is progressing, it could lend ourselves. So that's why we've got the flexibility in there. But it's also tying into the fact that our net revenue stream is reducing because our government funding is reducing. So it comes pretty much back down to our business rates and our council tax requirement is all the funding, so it's self-financing. So in some ways it shows that the more self-funding we are, obviously, the risks increase because we're already reliant on what we've got.
Yeah, thank you. And just to, sorry, Chair, just the point about something has to be done quite urgently, is that what these numbers are telling us?
Yeah, they are a flag, and if we're in a really difficult position at the moment, obviously, because we aren't going to exist. So it's really a difficult call. And obviously, I wanted to produce these papers as if we were going to exist, because this is what is going to go into the new council, and obviously there will be work done. But these kind of risk metrics will be looked at. And if we were to write to the government asking for exceptional financial support, things like this, just it's going to fly off the table and smack them in the face, really, because that is that's very obvious indications, particularly as we've done so much work and delivered so many savings on the transformation, which has really helped. But there are some underlying factors and assumptions in here that we could present a completely different picture, and I could not project in that same way. But I don't think that I think it's important to show what could happen and what the position may be.
Sorry, yeah, I'm not going to ask another question. Just I totally agree. I mean, you say in page 60, paragraph 3.5, that we would have to ask for exceptional financial assistance if it wasn't for LGR. So, yeah, but thank you, Chair.
Before I go to Councillor Owens, just in view of the recent sales of property, which will obviously give you a receipt and what was discussed last night, for instance, and stuff like that. Obviously, you can't put those in these figures because they haven't happened yet, and I don't know if any of the sales we've actually received anything for yet. But I'm guessing that would give a different picture on this as and when they happen. So the sooner they happen, the better for everybody. Yes.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, give me the cash as soon as you can. I mean, we have included, the small ones that we have had, and that's just gone to, fund transformation and things like that. But yeah, anything we do, we sell that we can, do something with it, either fund the capital programme, fund transformation, or we can do some debt restructuring. That will change these figures quite significantly.
Thank you. Right, and then Councillor Rowlands.
Thank you, Chair. Page 46, 6.10. We've always understood that where sales of our assets are being pushed through, and I'm thinking of possible car park in my area, that there would be an immediate beneficial effect as far as the council was concerned. This seems to throw doubt on that, doesn't it? That the money raised from these sales is not automatically becoming available to deal with the shortfall in some of our revenue accounts.
We can't directly use capital receipts to fund our revenue. Capital receipts can only be used to fund capital spend, or under the flexible use of capital receipts, which the updated policy is in here, transformation costs, or to repay down debt. That's in statute. That's the only things we can do. So that's why things like repaying, restructuring debt and funding transformation, that does have a positive impact on the revenue account. But day-to-day services we cannot fund from. What it does do is give us some cash, so we won't necessarily have to do some borrowing as well. So there's that kind of side effect, but we can't do anything directly with them.
Can I just come back? So it means that we've always understood it as if there was a sale of something that would go immediately towards overcoming shortfall in the general accounts of the council. What this item reveals, it's not as simple as that. That it's a roundabout way of justifying it, if you like.
We're having an argument over here who's got to answer. So I think there are a couple of things. Then we have always talked about disposing of assets in order to generate a capital receipt, which can then be used for a number of different things, which Ms Radford's just been through. One of the side benefits is that we would need less borrowing, or we could repay debts, and therefore there'd be less cash used in the repayment of that debt. And therefore that has the impact on the revenue accounts, as Ms Radford just said. We did have quite a discussion, the exempt part of executive committee last night. A lot of the argument for various different capital disposals could be down to how we utilise that receipt when we get it. In reality, the two conversations are quite different. We have to decide whether or not we want to dispose of an asset for the reasons relating to whether or not that asset is beneficial to the council, and looking at the potential capital receipt. But then the use of that capital receipt is then decided at the point where we have it, so that it can be used in the best way possible for the objectives at that time. So I don't think this paragraph is saying what you're reading into it. I think it's just trying to say that we can utilise the capital assets. It's useful to dispose of capital assets in order to generate a capital receipt, and therefore that gives us options in terms of how to utilise it.
And I suppose for context of the way things, I'm just trying to find a table, the way things are presented in this report, we can't use capital receipts to fund the direct cost of services. The impact of those capital receipts will be seen in the indirect cost of services, and that's a distinct differential.
Okay, thank you. I think I'm going to sometimes risk asking the questions. Anyone else got any questions? Because I suddenly see 7 hands go up. But no one else has put their hand up and wanting to. So I'm going to call it a day there. Thank you very much to the team for their time and effort putting the papers together, and the whole team, because I know it's not just you. And thank you for being here to obviously answer all the questions. I'm sure you'll be experts by the time we get to the briefing, the members' briefing. Okay, so if you don't want to hang around, you're more than welcome to go. Okay, so that brings us to item 8. I've done it again. I see the kill in my eye. I always forget it. Bear with me just 1 second. I'm going to go back. What page is it?
From 41 to 42.
Okay, I'm just going to put it up.
Will be slightly adjusted.
Okay, let me just bring it up on here rather than trying to find it in 41. And I'm not going to do what I just did a minute ago. I'm just going to say yes. Right. Okay. So the recommendations are on page 4. Okay, so if you go to page 41, we've got the committee is advised to recommend the executive that it recommend to the executive that it recommends to the council at its budget meeting in 18 February the approval of the MTFS and associated revenue budget estimates and strategies covering the period of 26 to 27, 29, 30, which includes all those items 1, A, B, C, D, E, and then 2, F, G, H.
It's O, which will be slightly amended.
Okay, which will be slightly amended. So are we happy to approve that and send that to the executive and the full council? Yeah. Agreed. Okay, cool. Thank you. Thank you for that. I've got you out of my corner of my eye. Right, we will now move on to the annual plan. Thank you, Miss Bainbridge.
Thank you. So this is the draft annual plan for 26-27, so it'll run from the 1st of April until the end of March, just prior to the vesting day for the new council. This is the usual format that you're used to seeing at this committee, so it's the projects, milestones, performance targets, and the themes of the council strategy. We are very happy to take any questions or comments on the draft plan, which we'll then incorporate into the report when it comes to the executive for approval, although that is subject to the approval of the budget in order to have the resources to deliver the plan. This plan that's coming before you does have 2 additional sections which they don't normally. On page 177 of the agenda pack, it's actually got a section around actions to deliver LGR. We wanted to reflect these for members to sort of capture the significant additional work that will need to take place over the year. We've already talked about staffing resources reducing due to the choose to leave element of the transformation programme, and we are aware that the LGR work does present a significant resourcing demands on officers, so we're going to track those demands alongside monitoring the deliverability of the annual plan actions. So we'll do a formal review in the summer, and as we did this year because of the transformation programme, report any risks to you as part of the mid-year, which will come to you at sort of towards the end of the calendar year. And then right at the end there, which is page 181 of the agenda pack, we talk about 27-28. So we acknowledge that, you know, we won't exist then. We will be replaced by the West Surrey Council, but there will be some residual actions, such as closing and auditing of the last Surrey Heath accounts, some statutory returns and reporting. So this year or next year, we'll be identifying those actions and just adding them to the plan for sort of future reference. So we'll welcome any comments or questions.
Thank you. And one of the things, I saw Councillor Wilson, one of the things that we did discuss at the Chair's briefing that I was obviously looking at, that there's a number of items that are in March 27, which is obviously pretty much very close to when everything changes. So obviously the mid-year, end of third quarter, whatever it is going to be quite key to looking at where we are with these, because obviously there's quite a lot in for that. Right, Councillor Wilson, I believe you were the first one to put your hand up.
Thank you, and thank you for this report. I understand the workload at the moment must be absolutely huge. One minor typo, page 14 out of 39 in the title, but I'll leave that. Two questions. Would it be the expectation then that the members of the Shadow Authority for West Surrey would, and the officers would create another annual plan that would go on to the end of this one for 27-28? And would that be for the whole of West Surrey, or would there be a Surrey Heath element or anything? And then a specific one, perhaps a recommendation to the executive might want to look at on page 12 out of 39, which is page 154. That at the bottom, there's about a measurement of the quality of decision making for appeals being allowed against planning decisions. And I was at a training course recently about this, and the government monitor it in two sets of measurements, one for majors and one for minors. And the councils have to pass the 10% on both. So would it be worth, just a suggestion to the executive, would it be worth having two measurements? Because the council has to pass them both. If they fail either, then the council can become designated and people can make planning applications to the inspectorate instead of to the council. Thank you. Sorry, it's such a long question.
Over to you.
So I'll deal with the last question first, if that's okay. We can certainly speak to our colleagues. The only thing I would say is we don't have that many major applications, so it might be worth us kind of reporting a shared percentage, but then in the comments kind of articulating which are, yeah.
That is the problem, because it's so few. If we just get a few people returns
Yes.
for majors, we could easily bust the 10%.
Yeah, bust over. So yeah, no, absolutely, we can certainly add that detail in when we report. And I think Nick's going to take the question about the annual plan for, or the corporate plan for West Surrey.
Yes, thank you, Councillor Wilson. Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Ms Bainbridge. No, I was in all seriousness going to take this question. So in relation to continuity or continuation of some of the projects we have, I was sat in on a Shadow Authority workstream meeting this morning, which is an officer meeting to talk about the Shadow Authority and the work that needs to be done in advance of that forming in May, and then the work programme that Shadow Authority would have before it then effectively becomes the successor authority in the new West Surrey Council or East Surrey Council. And one of the things we did talk about was continuation of annual plans or the creation of a corporate plan for the Shadow Authority. So it's very much at the forefront of our minds that you don't just stop the activities that are taking place because they fail to be delivered by the end of a financial year and a new authority takes over. There would still want to be a continuity of projects through to that successor authority in the same way as you would want to continue your services in a seamless way. So it's very much a thought process at the moment, but it's one that will start to expand and will provide more detail when the time is right.
That's great. That's exactly what I was thinking. So there would have to be some sort of Surrey Heath element to that to take on these projects. Yeah.
Someone's got a burning desire to put a hand up, so I'm going to ask a few questions because I've got some here. Page 5 of the paper, 147 of the pack, 1.05. It says monitor funding allocation and inflation impacts to address any shortfall. Is this something that's going to be funded through funding or grants, or is it something that's going to be funded through the council's budget?
I think this is probably one that Sue can answer. Mindenhurst.
Is this
funding.
1.05?
Yeah, Mindenhurst funding.
Okay, so the Mindenhurst development and all of the elements that will transfer to the council all come with Section 106 agreement. So they are fully funded and there is funding contributions moving into the future as well.
So when it says impacts to address any shortfalls, where would the shortfalls likely to come from?
I'm not aware of any shortfalls at the moment, I'm going to be honest. So I will pick that up and I will come back to you. But I think it is that, if you like, the agreement was a number of years ago. So whilst inflationary, additions, if you like, to that funding have been made available. So we have an example with one of the playgrounds where now the pot of money that we're given doesn't quite sufficiently meet the amount of play equipment that we would want to put in the playground. So then we are using SIL contributions to make that a bigger, better playground, if you like. So I think it's things like that. Okay. But I'm not aware of any other examples I can give you.
So it's unlikely that this won't happen, was basically where I was going with that.
Absolutely.
Okay. Thank you. I have another question. I can't remember what the question was, though. Bear with me 1 second. I typed these questions in, but I don't actually put one here. Page 11 of the paper, 153 of the total amount. Why are items lower than last year? Oh, yeah. So why are the... We're on bins. I knew it. First 2 points. The numbers are lower than they were last year. Is that because we didn't hit and I know we haven't got to the end of this year yet, is that because we're not going to hit the targets this year? So we've made the targets lower because we've had conversations about residual waste, etc. before?
So they've looked at the performance on a 12-month rolling basis. They keep that under close review, and they feel that these targets kind of reflect the current level of performance and sort of likely performance for next year. So I think there was always a recognition that I think that at one point there was a 63% target, that was always very much a stretch target, and the targets do still reflect, they haven't had the latest quartile figures published yet, I don't think, but they would still reflect very high performance nationally, even with these reduced targets.
I only have one more question, and it's not bins, it's parking, I think. Bear with me just 1 second. Oh yeah, the number of people parking. So that's page 25, total paper 1 of the paper 167. Why is there no target for the number of people parking? Because we've clearly got figures, because I've seen them and I know we've discussed them. So why is there no target? And also, I've just noticed that heading says 25, 26. Oh, hang on. Now I'm reading. There was no target for last year, was there? I'm now just reading. As I'm reading that's so maintain performance against same quarter previous year, but there's no figures. I'm guessing you will have figures.
It's because we've changed the definition, or we're proposing to change the definition. In recent years, we've compared to pre-COVID, but we didn't feel that was helpful anymore. But we didn't want to put the target from this current year because that was a different definition. Okay. So that's all that is. It's just a change of definition.
And again, I know you brought it to us before it goes to executive, so I know there's obviously maybe some gaps as well. But thank you for. I didn't say at the beginning. Thank you for bringing this together, because I know this does take a lot of time. Right, they're all the questions I had. So, I'm going to go to Councillor Noble first, although you were a little bit quicker, Councillor Wilson. Councillor Noble and Councillor Wilson.
Thank you, Chair. Page 158, two factors there. The people reached by the Heritage Service target 6,500 compared to actual performance of 7,217, and the Camberley Theatre target 60% compared to 72% annual average performance. These are two really good assets within the community, and they've been really successful. I just wondered why we were scaling back on the targets there.
The Heritage Service, I think the target is staying the same. So it's not, we're just not increasing the target, but the performance for last year was better than the target. So it's really comparing like for like, if you like, so we hopefully will achieve even better this year. The attendance is, again, it's a similar situation. We want 60% attendance to all events that we put on. We're actually achieving 72 at the moment. We could consider raising the target, but Kaylee might kill me, which is not something I'm prepared to do. No, but again, it's because it's a similar thing. We always hope to get better participation, but I think the target's a realistic one.
Okay. Sorry, my mistake for misreading it, but yeah, the actual performance is really good.
Councillor Wilson and then Councillor Nirmal-Kang.
Thank you, Chair. It's so page 33 out of 39, which is page 175. So the bottom line there about business rate collection, and this council's always had a good performance on collection of council tax and business rates. In the comments, it says the 24-25 performance was 95.43%, which is kind of below the targets we're looking at for this year and next year. So. Is that correct? Was there a problem, and would any shortfall on this potentially reduce the collection fund surplus that we talked about earlier?
It's a reporting thing. So when we ran the reports, the system generates that percentage, and on the last couple of days of the month there was a bill that wasn't paid, basically. So we didn't adjust because we didn't adjust prior year, and it would have got really confusing. So it's just a technicality on that side on an actual basis, unfortunately.
Oh, great. And the collection fund surplus that we talked about earlier, is that linked to this at all?
The collection fund surplus is council tax and there's business rates. So that will take, it's quite a bit more complicated than just that because it's, lots of ins and outs, reliefs and lots of other things. So no would be the answer, not directly.
Councillor Normal Kang.
Thank you, Chair. Investment Day, the 1st April 2027, is a very important day. Obviously, on page, 142, 8.7, obviously there's a lot of closing down matters which are sort of, in a way, trivial, in a way, it's something that would be done, the auditing account and things like that. But are there any major projects would overrun after the 1st of April 2027, which may be scrapped? Are there sort of things which this council probably wanted to do but might have come to the point where it's overgone its target date and someone else starts to make the decision?
If I may, Chair, I can come back on that. Thank you, Councillor Kang, for the question. It's unfortunately not a decision of this authority. It will be a decision of the successor authority, so West Surrey Council, and the councillors therein. So clearly those that represent the current Surrey Heath Borough Council, if they happen to move on to the new West Surrey Unitary Council, I would hope that they would insist there was an element of continuation so that these projects can continue through and be completed.
If I could follow up, so I suppose what I'm trying to say is, are there any projects or some things that we want to complete before someone else takes over?
It's a fair question, and I think everything in the annual plan we'd like to complete within the next financial year. We absolutely would. If there are things that do end up overlapping into subsequent years, we would certainly lobby our colleagues in the new unitary as that starts to form to make sure that they do continue through to a conclusion. Otherwise, it would be monumentally foolhardy of that new authority.
Just to make it, obviously council have to rely on, and the major vehicle is council tax. And once we go into this West Surrey unitary, then there needs to be a harmonisation of council taxes as well. And as you know, that certain boroughs are in debt, so there's going to be a major impact on any programmes which are not completed.
It's a very much difficult question for me to answer. The new successor authority will set their council tax levels. You're right, there will be an element of harmonisation that will occur. They will set their budgets and they will set their corporate plan to effectively set up their stall and determine what they want to deliver within their first year or multiple years if they want to set a corporate strategy, which I would imagine they will. So I'm afraid I can't give you a clear answer, Councillor Kang. It'll certainly be one for the new shadow authority, which will sit in May. And I'm sure those councillors that sit on that new West Surrey Council will be eager to set up their stall very early on.
Thank you. I'm not seeing a rush of hands. Thank you. Thank you for your time, and we'll see you with this again whenever it will be. Have I got to... this is probably the one I don't have to do.
There isn't, unless you
okay.
want to draw anything.
No, so obviously you've noted anything that we've brought up anyway, so apart from that, no, there's nothing else. So, okay, thank you for that, everybody, and your input. So that takes us on to the work programme. So we've only got one more meeting before the end of the municipal year. The Q3 Finance Monitoring Report we've done this evening. So we've got Theatre, Heritage and Leisure Update Report and the Corporate Enforcement Plan. So we've got no financial reports coming. There was a woo from anybody that didn't hear that. So has anybody got any burning desire to suggest anything else for that? No. And just for, go on.
We talked about something last night that we said we could come to PNF.
We did.
The chair, indeed.
What did, oh, you didn't talk to me about it?
Yes, you were there.
Yeah, and what was it? Because I can't remember what it was. It was last night. I've slept since then. What was it?
Yes, Chair, we did speak about it very briefly before this meeting, which relates to a legal matter which will be going to executive, so it will be going to Performance and Finance Review Committee after the decision by executive, but it was felt that it was important that it had scrutiny.
Am I allowed to mention the name? Because we've already mentioned the name, what it was actually relating to, so people know what we're talking about. So we're talking about the Amy decision, etc. It was discussed last night, and it thought it would be good to come to PNF. Although it will be after the executive, it was thought that it was probably worthwhile coming here as well, so we can scrutinise it. So, has anyone got any particular issues with that, or are we happy to add that to the what will be a short agenda, I suspect, looking at this? So that'll be after the conversations about Amy. It'll be coming to us. We can scrutinise anything. Oh, hello.
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. Sorry. Mr. Stevens, I also think there was something we discussed on Monday evening, which Councillor Rise was raising as a potential topic. Anyway, I will have a look back at my notes and see. So there might be something else.
I will also check my notes and then I'll interject if we need to.
So there might be another random item that we don't know about yet, but it looks like they're going to check it now while we're talking. Okay, so just for avoidance of doubt, because we had a conversation this week, the portfolio holders are welcome. Yeah, I'll just do this while I think about it. The portfolio holders are always welcome to come to this committee if there's a paper that's being done on their particular portfolio, just so there's no avoidance of doubt. So I'm expecting that will be Councillor Rise for that one, and corporate enforcement will be, was that Councillor Ashbury? Okay. Right, so who was it that, was it Councillor Rowlands?
Are we looking for topics to go on the agenda?
We are subject to what it is, because we've literally, at this moment in time, and Mrs. Scott can obviously take a note, obviously that meeting, we're potentially going to add 2 items to it already, so we can certainly, what was it you were thinking about?
Can I suggest housing?
You can, did we not just, we had housing?
Well, I guess Councillor Rowlands, specifically what topic in housing?
I don't think that's one for this committee, but can we take a note of it and we can discuss it offline and see if that's something we can discuss here, or if there's somewhere else, because I'm conscious. Go on.
Councillor Wheeler wants to come in. I'm assuming it's saying that we've already had a briefing through Mr. Bartlett.
Councillor Wheeler.
Thank you. I think it came across hours ago this evening. I'm very concerned about the waste contract and the timing in relation to the Shadow Authority and the new Unitary Council. And I wonder if it would be prudent to have an update on that towards the late spring.
The new municipal year, yeah? Okay, is that something we can take on board? Okay, thank you. And do we know what this other item was?
It was the same item.
Which? Oh, the same item that we've just discussed, that we've already... Fine. Okay, that's brilliant. It's not another item then. Okay, cool. So I think we've covered that off. Anything else? Going around the room? No. In which case, thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for all your questions and reading the papers. Thank you, anybody that's online. And have a lovely, good rest of your evening. Thank you.